This is the meeting of June 5th, Cable TV Advisory Task Force. Being about 7:20, we'll bring the meeting to order. Donna, would you like to highlight these emails that you just provided to us?
Okay. As many of you know from the emails I sent to the task force, there are some bills in the Senate being discussed that could affect the funding of the franchise fee and public access funding. They're still under discussion. Now it's believed that the House will vote on what's called the COPE Act as early as Wednesday. We would like to see that not pass as it is written, but we are not sure what's going to happen at this point. And I appreciate everyone who's written letters and made telephone calls in support of public access and has expressed their opinion that the bills in this act in particular would adversely affect public access television. So we're not sure. Again, it seems to be moving along, but at a slow rate. We're not sure exactly when the action will be taken on this particular bill. So the other email I gave you just explains what could be some of the adverse effects. I believe that's the one I gave. If the bill were to pass. Let's see. So it just includes some of the details about what the bill includes and why it wouldn't be beneficial to local municipalities.
So are you saying these two different emails are dealing with the same bill or a different bill?
No, they are dealing with the same bill.
So on this one, this email, you're urging the members to vote no on the bill?
That's correct.
Okay, and you would also want them to be against the bill in this email
Right.
as
This
well?
just explains what some of the details of the bill involve, and well, that explains it as well. But this is more of a call to action.
Now, I see here
Statement.
Representative Ed Markey from Massachusetts here.
Yes.
Now, is he for us or against us?
He's been a long-time advocate of public access.
Okay, so
He's working with us. Yes.
And you may have mentioned this before, but what about our other legislators?
Well,
John Tierney,
yes.
and the two senators.
Congressman Tierney has actually written to me and expressed his concern over this bill and has expressed that he would not be in support of this bill. So that is a really good thing. Primarily, many of the legislators from the New England area, I believe, are overwhelmingly against this bill. They truly understand the effects it would have on the local municipalities. So they've been very supportive.
I would have to imagine that to some degree the level of support for the bill is affected by the degree to which other areas of the country have active public access groups.
That's true. And I think the New England area is one of the strongest areas of access and really understands and appreciates the value of access. So it does make a lot of sense that we have a lot of support here. We're just hoping that other areas of the country, other states, understand what it means if this bill were to go through, what they would be losing. So we're just hoping it doesn't pass in the form it exists right now.
Now, do we know which states are the ones that are most in favor of this bill passing?
I do have probably somewhere in a lot of my paperwork, a kind of breakout of some of the areas of the country, or some of the other legislators that are in support of this, but I don't have it with me right now.
But is there any kind of pattern or trend? In other words, is it more East Coast versus West Coast, Mid-America, North, South?
It almost seems just more a sort of a Democratic and Republican kind
Red and
of
blue.
issue.
How does this affect, say a municipality wants to use the public right-of-way and the poles on the public right-of-way to run, say, like I would be concerned about if the schools wanted to run a fiber connection or a loop through town. Would this bill possibly block that? Running any kind of school fiber or anything like that?
I'm not sure how that would be affected, because right now, see, what this primarily affects is the funds that are collected for cable companies to use the rights of way and to support the network that was set up, that was agreed upon to set up in a town, so that the town could have the internal communications and have, basically we have cable drops at every public building in town, things like that. And the town has chosen and uses this network also for data transmission, so that's something that's set up and agreed upon when a cable company comes into the town. And in order to support public access television, which is principally programming for and about the community. It's for the community to use to produce their own programs. The contract involved collecting fees from the cable bill, through the cable bill. It's actually by federal law, cable companies, as it exists today, cable companies are required by law to provide certain things to the communities. If the law changes, that's what we're concerned about. So right now, all of these things have been put into, or many have been put into place in many communities, but things could change dramatically if this bill passes. And some communities, other parts of the country, they haven't set up a structure like that yet. But with the technologies converging, some of the large corporations are questioning whether or not they need to comply with the so-called rules of a cable company.
Is there anything that you would recommend that we do at this point, either collectively as a committee or individually as residents, with respect to this pending legislation? The town did, we did issue a letter to our legislative delegation some time ago, raising concerns about the legislation that was in process. We didn't receive any response, which was a little surprising.
Yes, thank you. I did see that, and I appreciate that. It would, if the task force would agree to do that, and they agree that they would like to show their opposition to this bill, it would be really beneficial to go ahead and comment to our local legislators about our feelings as a task force, our opposition to this particular bill. on behalf of Wilmington and WCTV, I'm constantly writing and calling, but I think it really, hearing from a local task force, hearing from local town government really has a big impact on, legislators are really willing to listen to the local municipalities and how they feel about it, rather than only people involved in access television.
Lindsay?
I mean, is our only option really to try and preserve the status quo and make sure that, this town's telecommunications needs and whatever it is we're trying to do are served under the existing legislative and regulatory framework, or can we get out ahead of this and come up with, some other mechanism to provide streams of funding and resources that we need to preserve this?
Well, that's a really good question. We just haven't come up with any other viable options at this point. So we're first trying to preserve the funding that we have. It's really difficult. Many community access centers, for example, have started sponsorship and underwriting programs. We all have been doing that to some extent, but it's been, it probably accounts for a very minimal percentage of the funds that come in today. It's very difficult within a local town or city to really get the funds to support what they currently have. So the first goal is to, maintain what we have while we search for other sources of funding, or other ideas on how we would redesign or replan our organizations.
I'm not, familiar with all the details of the legislation, probably not as much as you are, Donna, but it seems if the premise is that after all these years of acknowledging that the cable providers have been given access to a right-of-way, and as part of that have been required to provide a level of compensation for their access to a town right, and now this legislation seeks to remove that. It seems, I have to believe it's come up in discussion, but how is it that unless there's some kind of change in thinking that those rights of way that they're gaining access to are of no value, how can they make a case that they can get a benefit without providing some kind of compensation for that?
Yeah, I really don't understand where they're coming from, other than saying, well, they're not, many of them are, other companies are positioning themselves as not primarily a cable company, and therefore not having to, they're a primary telephone company, or, that they shouldn't have to pay for the public rights of way. They already have their lines installed, or the rules were not written to comply for companies such as theirs to comply. This is the whole tricky thing behind all of this, because the convergence of technology has made it challenging, because of the way the laws were written in the past, where these services were so separate and no one anticipated, or really wasn't written into law. If anything changed, then it would, affect companies or services in this way. So
one of the things we may want to do is to issue some kind of either letter or, at this point, email if there's a Wednesday vote, and maybe direct it to the chairperson of this committee, as opposed to just sending it to our legislative delegation, since they already have a sense of how our feelings, how we feel about this. to see if that, that just add our voice to the, what's already being said, I presume, at least in some quarters. If there's any, what's the rest of the,
Yes, actually, it does say we can contact just send our comments through to the Capitol switchboard or,
is this,
Majority Whip Roy Blunt.
yeah, maybe he's
That's,
the
yeah.
key
I think
person to...
that's the key person to contact.
If there's interest, I would entertain a motion for perhaps Donna and me to put something together in the form of an opinion on the part of this committee in opposition to this particular legislation.
I still would like to see us try and figure out how to get ahead of this a little bit. I don't know whether we can hire a consultant or team up with other teams, other towns, whatever it is we need to do to get some additional options on the table to see if, where this, where this is going to go down the road, which is, obviously you have a lot of wireless and satellite communications and other kinds of things. Those companies aren't using rights of way at all. If everything migrates that way downstream, then we really need some kind of broader based access fee for companies to access subscribers in town that's just balanced and across the board, regardless of the type of pipe that's being used. There's a small little toll that's exacted somehow that's supporting the public benefit of the public access television studios. And I don't know whether legislation exists already to allow the town to enact a fee like that, or whether state laws or federal laws would have to be changed to enable that. I'd like some options. I'd like to know, and whether that's us somehow retaining, doing it on our own and working with a consultant to sort of figure out how, what things will look like 3, 5, 10 years out, and how do we get ahead of this, or whether we team up with other towns, or there's maybe the Massachusetts chapter of NATOA. Is there a Mass NATOA?
Has NATOA as a group come up with any kind of alternative to what's being debated now?
Well, not at this time. It's under discussion, but I guess right now, and I'm asking the task force to consider this also, given the urgency of this bill, and because we haven't yet really had time to have discussions about other options or come up with other options, I would ask that you still consider that we send a letter opposing this for now. Most communities are struggling with this right now. What will we do if something like this passes either now or in the future? But as long as we can still take some action, I would ask that we do so to preserve the funds we have now and to retain the ability to negotiate contracts on a local level. Part of this is to really take away the ability for cities and towns to negotiate a contract and become statewide and not serve the needs of individual towns and cities. For example, we in Wilmington have used our access television channels and station for 18 years versus other communities that don't even use all their channels right now, and they don't even have an access center. So how would they determine what cities or towns need what, even on a state level? They'd probably go determine it by the number of cable subscribers, and some communities that don't use all their channels have more cable subscribers than Wilmington. It's
In the INET that we have that serves the safety department in the school, we would have to fund that ourselves. The town would have to fund that at a minimum.
Sure.
So I'd be in favor of making a motion to voice our displeasure with this upcoming amendment or bill.
My second motion.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to prepare a letter to Congressman Blunt, I guess, or whoever the appropriate individual would be at this point, in opposition to the current legislation. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay.
Just to be difficult.
I mean, I don't know, I'm new, but I'll throw my 10 cents in. But I mean, I think definitely need to oppose it just for now, just to, you know, obtain the funds. But from my perspective, you know, 3 years from now, this bill might not even really,
Might be moot.
Yeah, might be moot, because they'll be a content digital information provider like Verizon, DSL is, and they'd probably be under the same regulation at that point. So, you know, we'd have to move to find funds from that kind of a provider.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger question doesn't go away even if we stave off this particular legislation. Ultimately, either through legislation or technology, I think we're rapidly coming to a point where the existing structure of cable is short-lived. So, I mean, probably I would think on a regional or national level, probably through NATOA, since they're the most coherent and active group that I'm aware of. There needs to be some serious consideration given as to how public access adapts to this changing environment, you know.
I'm sure it'll be a topic of discussion for many of our meetings and actually the Alliance for Community Media is quite a strong organization, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing this at the conference that's going to be held. The national conference is going to be held in Boston in July this year, so that's, I'm sure, going to be the topic of many discussions.
Are you attending that, or?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And staff as well.
If you have a chance, you may want to just circulate. I don't know. Is that open to others as well?
Yes.
Cable committees and so on.
Yes. I'll get information to all of you, and you can take a look at some of the workshops and discussions, forums.
Yeah. I mean, it may even be worth submitting some kind of a letter to whoever the appropriate person is with the Alliance, just raising the issue that, you know, that we've talked about here, that we would strongly encourage the Alliance to be, if they haven't already begun, looking at how local public access can adapt to the changing legislative or technological environment. Okay. That's ultimately the long-term, whether this legislation passes or fails, I think we're still under the gun. Okay. If we're all set there, I just wanted to welcome Neil to the committee. Neil, I guess you were appointed a couple of weeks ago, right? To serve on behalf of the school. Neil, if you want to maybe take a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself and maybe give us a little about your position and where your background maybe. Or...
Sure. Like Jeff said, my name's Neil Ellis. I'm the network manager at the school system, which basically means that I manage and maintain all the information systems at the 8 schools in the Roman House. We have 2 technicians in the department and myself who are responsible for maintaining about 1,200 computers on a wide area network that's all cable, iNet loop. Currently, we have, I don't know, I guess we also have 2 cable internet connections in the school system. We'll be upgrading that to 8 individual internet connections from Comcast. My background, let's see, I've been doing IT for about 9 years now, almost 10. In several different locations. I work for the city of Peabody on the city side. I worked for the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, and I worked for the Camp Trust McKee Environmental Engineers for a little while, doing information systems. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, I quite honestly, I don't have an awful lot of information for you tonight regarding the license. As I mentioned in the email, between this and I'm going through bidding the town's insurance, so I've been spending a tremendous amount of time gathering information for underwriters, and so this has been, because of the deadline on that, I haven't been able to complete the drafts. What I would like to see if propose is that we have another meeting later in the month, either the 19th or the 26th, which would be the meeting where we would actually vote on issuing these the request for proposal, and in the meantime, between now and middle of next week or thereabouts, I would expect to try to get a document to you to review before the meeting. The next meeting that is slated to happen, given our first Monday schedule, is July 3rd, although as a practical matter with the July 4th holiday, I'm not sure how realistic that is, so I'd hate to go, get too far into July without having issued a RFP. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there for discussion and see if there was any opportunity to meet, whether it's a Monday or some other day between now and the end of the month.
I do have a June 19 Board of Directors meeting, but if the task force is available to meet on a Wednesday night, I would request a meeting on the following Monday or maybe the Wednesday before, so that would be the 21st.
Everybody pull out your palms and...
Yeah.
So what is the date that's out there right now?
The dates I was suggesting are either the 19th or the 26th, but Donna is also asking about the 21st. So the 19th, 21st, or 26th.
Yeah, the 19th is not good for you.
21st.
Okay, so let's cross the 19th out.
Yeah, I can't do the 21st.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got the 21st.
So 21 is out as
Yeah.
well? Okay. So we have the
26th
26th,
I can do.
which was
Yep.
what day of the week is that?
That's a Monday.
Okay. For me, that's more doable than July 3rd, that's for sure.
Yeah. You want to go with the 26th then? If we can do that? Okay, let's plan on doing that. 6/26
7 p.m.?
at 7.
Gives you another one.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind, can we set it for 7:15? It's not that it's a big deal, but Mondays right now for me, my wife is going to school, so I got here late because I was trying to get the kids supper before I ran out the door, so 15 minutes gives me a little extra to do that.
I think we can manage.
All right, good.
Fine with me, I'm always struggling to get here. I never get here by 7.
Okay.
And your goal is by the end of that meeting to have some agreement on the request for proposal that would be able to be sent out after that? We wouldn't need an additional meeting after that?
Right. My plan would be to have the document to you. I mean, it is partially complete in terms of the request for proposal, and we have a draft license. Following Peter Epstein's advice, who is our town or our legal counsel on this, he's suggesting that the document, the complete document, be comprised of the request for proposal, which lays out the requirements for the bid, the criteria that we're looking at, and he's also suggesting that we draft a license for them to that serves as kind of the jumping off point for our discussion. So the license, a draft license, is in rough form at this point, and I'm about, I would say, 40% through the RFP. So my plan would be to have a complete document ready by at the beginning, well, probably the middle of next week, and get that off to you so that you can take a look at it before the meeting, so that when we meet on the 26th, we can have some general discussion about particular points or whatever, but ultimately make any last-minute changes at that point, and then vote on the document or the document as amended, and then I'll issue it.
And will this request for proposal have anything in it requesting a senior discount that we've discussed?
Yeah, that checklist or that list that we've discussed at various points in the past that had probably 25 or 26 points on it. Many of those points would be included in there. Senior discount, an amount for equipment grants, and all those various points that we had talked about before.
That's fine. I was just anxious to know what the status of that was.
Yeah.
May I ask, did you get a reply from Comcast about the specific questions that you asked again?
Remember their non-answer to our
Yeah.
Any
questions?
further
No.
clarification of those?
I didn't, and quite honestly, just to fill you in, Neil, I had sent a letter on behalf of the committee out asking some questions about the FRCs, the franchise-related costs, and I think you have a copy maybe.
That's all this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read all that, yeah.
Oh, okay. And so you probably saw the response then that Comcast provided, which was not particularly revealing.
Yeah,
So
no, it didn't really say much.
there was a separate letter that was sent out essentially following up on that. I think I sent that out May 17th, and I have not seen a response, and I suspect won't get one at this point. I suspect they'll probably wait to respond to the extent that they do in their proposal. So,
Well, thanks for sending the letter
It
out.
was a good letter, too.
yeah, at least it gets it on the record that we're requesting
Right.
some follow-up there. Okay, so I guess rather than going through particular points at this stage, since I'm really not ready to do that, let me provide a couple of handouts and also just go through the status with Verizon. I don't believe I've provided the committee with this in the past, but this, just as an FYI, is the process for initial cable licensing, which is what we will be doing with Verizon. And since I'm running out of information here, I don't know if you saw this in the Globe on Friday. This is about Comcast's efforts to stay ahead of the curve. And then this final document, again, just to jump back to Verizon, is, and I'll go through these in detail. This is Verizon. With regard to the process for Verizon, I went to the Board of Selectmen's meeting a couple of weeks ago here and requested that they authorize to begin the process for cable licensing. They voted to do that as of May 22nd, so that now sets the stage really for the process cannot take longer than a year. So by May of 2007, assuming we still have a process to go through, we would have to complete the process of licensing Verizon. There was a request made to the Cable Commission, which you have a copy of the response there, essentially asking to waive a couple of items. One was a 60-day notice requirement. We were seeking a 30-day requirement to provide public notice of our intentions. And the second was the waiver of publishing that notice in a national publication. Based upon the fact that it's essentially Verizon that's pursuing this, and we're not likely to get other competitors at this stage. So they granted that, as they've done in all the other communities that have gone through the process. So the notices have been placed in the town crier last week, and it'll appear again this week. And so there's a 30-day notice that is advising potential vendors that that we're interested in another cable license. And then what we would do after that 90 days, actually after the 30 days, is we would expect to get a response from Verizon that outlines their intention to provide cable services. And it's the Form 100, which is essentially the same form that Comcast provides. It's kind of a boilerplate form that explains what it is, who they are, what their background is, why they believe they can provide cable service, and so on. And then we would have 90 days from that point to issue a written report defining the specifications for a license. And that 90 days is similar to the ascertainment process that we've already gone through, where we would kind of define a wish list of what it is we would be seeking, what the town's needs are with respect to cable service, and what it is we would expect them to provide in the way of local access support. So assuming the schedule, we would probably be looking to do that by or before October 1st. We have to provide a copy of that to the state, and then we would give them a couple of weeks to amend their proposal if, based upon what we issue, they want to revise their proposal. They would have an opportunity to do that. And then we would hold a public hearing similar to the one that we held, the two that we held for Comcast, to obtain public input. Within 60 days from the close of the hearing, the issuing authority would have to vote to accept or deny a license. So it's a similar process to the one that we've gone through, except it's just compressed in terms of time schedule.
So the entire time frame is approximately how long that would?
Well, it's probably, as a practical matter, 9 or 10 months, really. The challenge is going to be that this process is going to be running simultaneous to the process with Comcast in terms of the discussions and negotiations with them over the terms of a license. So, that'll be, I think, interesting in terms of, how we're going to have to really be, I think, have some kind of a game plan as to how we're going to proceed with both, because whatever we ultimately pursue with Comcast, we're presumably going to want to also pursue with Verizon.
It wouldn't be fair to give them two different contracts anyway, so
Right.
whatever we've got would
Yeah.
be basically a copy for Verizon.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to me that it makes it even more incumbent on us to try to settle the Comcast, well, either one, I suppose, as soon as possible, because once you settle one, then presumably you have the template for the other one. So that's the process there. Neil, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to, based upon the information that you've seen, identified any additional issues that you believe the schools may be interested in with respect to cable service, but if there are things that that you identify, next in the short term here, let me know, so we can incorporate that into the request.
Neil, did you have an opportunity to debrief with Louise?
I haven't, not with any of the
Is
Comcast.
she still available to?
She is. It's hard to know what she's kind of tapering off, and she's been in and out with her health, so it's hard to catch her every so often. But I can shoot her an email and get in touch with her.
If she has anything she wants to pass on to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, and I think with that, unless folks are interested in continuing the discussion about specific points to include in the license, which we did to a large degree at the last meeting, I really don't have anything more at this point. For me at this stage, it's just getting the document ready and giving you folks an opportunity to take a look at it, and we can then really have a more of a discussion. So it's
Move to adjourn?
I can second that.
okay. All those in favor?
Somebody else?
Anybody have any other discussions, or
No.
no?
not
Okay.
this time.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you.
Okay.